This is the type of Florida that we're in right now, where it is not worried about individuals like our community. It's their agenda or no agenda at all.
Hey, Grill fam, it's Gerren Keith Gaynor, White House correspondent and managing editor of politics at theGrio. And I'm here with Florida State Senator Shevrin Jones. Senator Jones, welcome back to theGrio. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, as you know, and your Republican colleagues in the Florida assemblies signed into law a permitless concealed carry law. I know you and your Democratic colleagues oppose this law. I asked about this in the White House press briefing recently, and the White House called it shameful. What do you make of this law, and how do you feel now that it is now law in the state of Florida?
Well, I totally agree with the White House. It is definitely shameful, especially on the heels of what just happened in Tennessee. But it's just a constant continuation of Republicans here in Florida just wanting to figure out what is the best method to attach themselves to their base. And they believe that this is one of the things that their base asked for. Some of their base, some of them are upset because they said it doesn't go far enough. But we just came out of a huge crisis in Miami-Dade County where the mayor and her team was able to put safeguards in place to deal with the gun violence within Miami-Dade County. With no regard from the Republicans, they did not even attempt to help, but yet still they passed legislation like this. That doesn't make us any more safe.
And when Governor DeSantis signed this law, he did it in private. Normally, when he signs certain laws, he does it with fanfare, like the Woke Act and the so-called Don't Say Gay bill. Why do you think he signed this particular law behind closed doors in his office?
Because it doesn't poll well, and they saw that it doesn't poll well. And so they didn't want to make a fanfare about this. And one of my colleagues told me behind the scenes that another reason they didn't do it is because of what had just occurred in Tennessee. But yet still, I mean, you make it looks worse because now you're doing it behind Floridians' backs, which is unfortunate. And I think they're seeing pushback from both sides and how it was done.
And I know you proposed an amendment to this law that ultimately did not pass that would have created a community violence task force. Why was that important for you, and why do you think Republicans voted against it?
Well, they said because they didn't want the bill to bounce back from the House. They didn't say it was a bad amendment. They said that it just probably wasn't the time for us to do it. But mind you, I have proposed this bill for the last two sessions, and it passed unanimously in both the House and in the Senate. And the main reason why the amendment came about was because after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened, they created a school safety commission. And so what we wanted to do was create the same thing for the urban area. After we could study gun violence within our community and bring those same results back into into the legislature. They didn't want that. And so here we are. They did give $10 million of a block grant to go to community violence and give to organizations that's working with community violence in the state of Florida. But and I'll end with this. I shared with them that we just can't throw money at this issue, right? The same time that we're taking to look at school safety because of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Well, what about the child who, when he or she is walking to school, all they see is the blood stains of what just happened the night before. There's trauma that need to be dealt with. There's economic issues that need to be dealt with, and they know the real issues.
And data shows that when it comes to gun violence, it's Black and brown communities that are disproportionately impacted. Can you speak to how Black Floridians and community members of color stand to be impacted the most by this new law?
Well, I mean, we stand to be impacted most when it comes to law enforcement. We already know where we stand when it comes to law enforcement. It's on their part, it's shoot first, ask questions later, and the person who you need to ask the questions to is dead. And so when we're talking about gun violence in our community, we're not talking about it just from a perspective of we want your guns. We're talking about it from a perspective of saying that we want our communities, we want our children, we want our families. Because you all are clear on what the trauma is and the problems that we're dealing with when it comes to police and community relations. The question was asked, and I asked it on the floor: do we see, or do you foresee an uptick in stand your ground cases? The bill sponsor responded back and said no, but the data doesn't say that. The attorneys don't say that, and any common person would say that. When you just have the opportunity now to carry a gun, and if a police officer know that you are carrying legally or permitlessly, then what happens? The officer is going to feel as if his or her life is in danger. And guess what? We have another scenario with a dead Black man or woman. Why? Because this is the type of Florida that we're in right now, where it is not worried about individuals like our community. It's their agenda or no agenda at all.
And what do you say to gun rights advocates who say that this permitless concealed carry law is important because it is a sovereign right, that is a right, the Second Amendment, a right to be able to own a gun without restrictions, without fees, without permits?
The first thing is first. No one wants to take guns away from individuals. Absolutely, we want to protect your rights. But at the end of the day, everyone who is carrying a gun should make sure, because the guns they're deadly. And that's as elementary as that might sound. I'm sorry that I need to even say that to people. They're deadly. And you need to be trained to make sure you know how to use a gun. The same way you have to be trained to use anything else that could be dangerous to yourself or others. It's the same way you should have for a gun. There's a reason why restrictions were put in place, because over a period of time, we learned more. Because we learned more, we did better. It seems like we're trying to roll all of these things back for the sake of safety, that what was put in place for the sake of safety. And now we're trying to remove these things all for the sake of politics.
The climate right now, I mean, we just saw the mass shooting in Nashville inside of a school where 3 children were killed, 3 adults. This is an epidemic that we're seeing right now in our country. And then this law is passed in your state. What do you make of this moment, given the timing of the signing of this law? And do you fear that this could lead to another tragedy? Because we've seen also school shooting tragedies in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, you Marjorie Stoneman Douglas happened. You had Pulse happen. Yeah, you have the series of killings that are happening in Miami-Dade County. Again, this is not going to make anyone more safe. More guns doesn't mean that people will be safer. I'll say that first. The second thing is what we're going to see a huge outcry from advocates across the state who are going to continue to push back on ensuring that these type of situations don't continue to happen and don't happen again. And the last thing I'll say is that I think it's going to be imperative of us as legislators, as my colleagues, Democratic colleagues, that we put it on the table of the truth and the facts of what it's going to take for us to truly get gun reform done. We shouldn't have to wait for the next school shooting. We should not have to wait for the next individual to be killed in the street in our communities. This should be something proactively that Democrats and Republicans should come together on, to know that whether it's your child or my child, we all should be looking for how and the best ways to protect each other. Governor
Ron DeSantis is likely to throw his name into the ring for the 2024 presidential election. And, there are pundits who believe that a lot of these laws that he's passing is feeding red meat to the base of the Republican Party, trying to get some of those Trump supporters, for example. But the polling and the data, as we've shown, even about this permitless concealed law, the data does not show that most Americans support a lot of these laws that the governor has signed. Do you believe that this will ultimately backfire on the governor if he does put his name in the race?
Go watch Wisconsin. Look what happened in some of these other elections that happened this week. All of this is a pushback on what the Republicans are doing. extremism can only go so far before people get tired of it. And it's true that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it always swings back towards justice. I believe that when it swings back, it's going to swing back hard, because right now it's a power grab that we're seeing. Wisconsin just showed us that people don't want that. That's the second time nationally we're seeing a pushback on Republicans' extremism. The first time was when Trump lost. And if they haven't learned from that these policies don't work, then so be it. And I know some people will be like, oh, well, DeSantis, he just won his election overwhelmingly. Yeah, you won, but how did you win? You won by voter intimidation. You won by purging the rolls. You won by making sure returning citizens make it difficult for them to vote. Let's talk about how you won. And it wasn't that as if more people went to go vote in 2020 than they did in 2016, excuse me. So let's be real. So I suggest they go look at what's happening in the trends across the country.
And lastly, another bill has emerged in Florida, a voting bill that has some provisions related to rules around voting registration organizations when they have to register with the state, making harassing election workers, making that a felony, as well as rules around previously incarcerated people and their ability to vote. Are there provisions in this bill that you support? What do you think generally of this bill?
Yeah, I get, surprisingly, it did not turn out to be as bad as I thought it was going to be. Actually, I'm going to do a TikTok later about what's actually in the bill, but it didn't turn out to be as bad as I thought, although it's still unnecessary, because there are provisions that is really a push on a lot of the third-party organizations that exist. Like a lot of them are youth organizations. You can tell that they are getting a hint that a lot of these Gen Zers are becoming very creative, and they're creating their own coalitions. They did give discretion to the supervisor of our elections to choose when they want to have their Sunday voting. There is also a provision when it comes to the harassment of poll workers. And so, I mean, there's a lot of the stuff that's in there. It's not bad, but the question is, what is this a vehicle for? And that's what I want to know. And because it hasn't come to the floor yet, so therefore we have time for amendments, and it's coming to rules next week. So I'm very interested in see what happens in rules.